Hey everybody, this is Steve at Thousand Years Homes. I've already put up the first half of the walkabout the property that I bought, 30 acres. It's cut in half, with half of it being hay fields and half of it being cedar thickets. And I would guess that at some point in time somebody had logged it because almost all the cedars to me look like 30, no more than 30 years old, maybe a little younger. So perhaps a whole thing was hayfield and somebody gave up on it. So this half of the walkabout, I find the deer skull for the deer bones that I found earlier. I actually run across that deer skull, and it's up in a tree. So either a person put it there, or a raccoon drug it up, or a possum drug it up, or something drug it up the tree. For sure, not the coyotes. And I put out some trail cameras, and definitely I have coyotes running about. And one night that I was out there sleeping in one of the containers, they howled right next to the container, and it made it ring like a drum. That's how close and how loud they were out there. But this walkabout, I'm just taking a look at the cedar thickets. Not a whole lot of big discoveries in here. All of these little feeder channels that run across my property, they build up speed and they run down to a river that feeds into Colorado called Buckner's Creek. And Buckner was a pioneer in the 1800s that came and did some things around Texas that got him a name for at least that little river. But anyway, all of the topography runs down to that, including the rivers that I'll be showing and here in Texas. Because the Edwards limestone is real close underneath the ground. When the water starts running and saturates the 18-20 inches of ground, it picks up a tremendous amount of speed. And one year I remember I was out in the woods on a bright, clear day, and I heard a train running through the woods, and I thought, there's not a train track around here. That is the strangest thing. And I got out of the wet river creek that I was in. It was totally dry. Just in time for this massive pile of cedar and rubble to roll by it. And it indeed sounded like a train coming through the woods. And who knows, 20, 30 miles away, there had been a massive rainstorm that had pushed all the water down my direction. So these little arroyos, they call them, while they look inconsequential, in big rain, they're not inconsequential. They are truly dangerous. So getting a grip about those, and then I'm taking a mental inventory of the cedar that I'll be picking up and using. And one last thing that's a little different is I'm going to be building a cedar chip driveway. I'm not going to be putting down gravel. I'm going to actually use cedar chip driveway, and they last about as long as gravel driveways. But you end up with a mycelium base, which is an organic base, and so I'll be doing that experiment with the leftover cedar, and we'll see how that will work. For the new drive that I'm going to put in, and I'll put some weight on it and do some things to see how long it'll last. My mother, and this wasn't 100 years ago, but my mother talked about the men who did corduroy roads in Indiana, and she said the logmen would come through and cut out the logs, and then the side bark that they were stripping off the timbers right out there, they'd lay down for the roads, and that they actually became the roads there in Indiana, and they called those corduroy roads back then. So the idea of a log road is long-standing. And of course, cedar doesn't decay, and I'm not going to buy a wood chipper. I've got my shredder on the back end of my tractor, so I'll be throwing those down and chipping them. So as I'm doing this walkabout and the tangled thicket full of mesquite, which has thorns, and cedar's not friendly either. Everything in Texas wants to scratch you, bite you, or sting you, and even the trees. And so I get pushed around. I can't really make a good pass through the cedar thicket. But I do make a reasonable survey of it, and I do find piles of brush that have been pushed off the fence line, providing some bit of a service road and a fire break should fire get loose in the backwoods there. So, but it's not a terrible eventful. No little bull tries to run me off, and other than finding a deer skull in a tree, I just chase some of these arroyos, and I do set up a little base camp there, keep the Camaro safe park it on dirt patches, and do a little bit of move about. But anyway, this is Steve from Thousand Year Homes. I appreciate you watching. Rest of this video will be mostly just wandering through the woods, me making commentary to myself. Again, this part of the whole adventure is more of a journal for me to remember what my decisions were later on. But I do appreciate you dropping by. And if you like what you hear, I don't run music backgrounds, and there's no fancy montages. And this is just an explanation of me building a house in the Texas thickets. So just like and subscribe if you like such a thing, and I really appreciate your company. You can see the water really picks up speed, so I'm going to guess this is a high point on the property, and it drops down here. So I'm going to step over this fence. I have to, and just carving into the ground. So I would say this is halfway through this paddock, where must have a taper. Way over there is the Camaro. Zoom in on it for reference. That's 20 times zoom. Apologies for the shaking. All right. Finished walking the hayfields. And then after lunch, I'll do the wooded area. I followed the stakes down, all the way down. You can't see the Camaro anymore. It went over the top of a little hill. And we'll walk through this and find out where the water runs inside here. Lunchtime. I found this little spot under the trees where I can safely put my Camaro. I'm going to go up and get my ladder and all my odds and ends. I'm back in this nestle of trees. Do that. Go ahead and peel that orange and finish my coffee. All right, so I went and had lunch with my daughter and little grandson. I changed base camps. I'm back in the first half of the trees, still looking for a place that I can build. So the most important thing for me is being dry, but this little meadow, which does show up on Google Maps pretty well, is a good reference point. So I'm going to leave this stuff until I come back. I got my chargers and drone and all that. I wasn't able to do drone footage today, but I'm going to walk that way and then follow the fence line all the way around. And again, I'm just looking for where the water runs. So I've found a post and perhaps represents halfway marker inside of the property. I can't see the property line there, and I can't see it there, but I'm going to guess there's the post, and if I cut straight through that meadow, I'm going to think I can see the stock tank. So I'll walk that way and go around that and then see if it lines up with the stock tank, and then I would know what is in this meadow. There's plenty of room, 100 foot by 100 foot, easy to build in here. It does look like high ground, but I wouldn't want to be directly downstream of that stock tank if it breaks. See, the cow path here is almost all mud. So this is very, very muddy. I'm going to record so I can have this for my own record. Well, I'm going to guess this is maybe a low ground since the cattle were so deep into the ground there. So maybe I'd need to shift it maybe farther over where I put the day supplies. Yeah, see, there's the stock tank. So my fear would be that the levee would break on the stock tank, and then it would dump all that water this way. And right along there, you know, that's where it's supposed to flow. But when water gets going, it's hard to stop. So, but certainly, this is probably low ground all the way through here. There's the stock tank. Hard to tell with the trees. I can't see the skyline. And that's probably a little higher. Earlier, that's where saw that oak tree that fell over. And again, the water's running there, but there's some low spot through there for sure. Right there. And I wouldn't want to to build in that. Now this is a little bit higher, a little bit drier. There's no deep cow hooves in it. I do know I want to build into the trees. And every time I cut down a male cedar, I'll put in a loblolly or something else. So this is that oak spot. And if you look, there's a little ditch there. I won't call it an arroyo. So there's a ditch, but some in front of me was pretty wet. Just after that oak tree, another little mesquite clearing. Now this is a little bit farther down from the stock tank. You can't see it through the tree, so if the levee broke, I'd be less worried about this getting flooded and the dryer right here. I'm not seeing any deep muddy hoof prints or anything. Another old oak there to take a look at. All right, so I walked that fence line and I'm nearly back to where the ravine is, and I can see in front of me that the land goes down. So there's something that runs that way, probably where all the mud was. So this might be a little bit of a high spot through here, since I didn't walk through any mud. And there's where the Wet Weather Creek comes out. There's some big trees in there. I tell you what, in Texas, when it rains 6 inches in an hour, well, that's an exaggeration, but it can rain for sure. These things fill right up. These arroyos fill right up. Old oak tree somebody put down with. That's quite a little ditch, but clearly runs over into there. So I'm gonna guess no more than 100 feet from the fence line. It's right through here. There's probably a couple of sites I could start building in. The first thing I'm building is a workshop. So the workshop doesn't have to be right up against, because I'm going to be all off grid. So yeah, definitely I'm going down 3 or 4 foot down into this little ditch here. So the other end of it, going back up. Well, here's some high ground that I could feel good about. So there's a great oak tree. 200 feet. There's a ditch. Oh, put my finger in. There's a ditch. Goes along. Back in there. So now I'm going to go up here just halfway to the fence line and cut back across and see what that is like. As I'm walking it, about 100 feet from the first ditch, there's coming up on another ditch. So I'm going to guess quite a bit of water runs through here in the rain. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere along these. I bet you if I do a satellite view, see where the trees are growing the thickest, that's probably where these ditches run. So there's another ditch 100 feet or so that way. Here's one. There's the end of the property over there. So plenty of high ground there for sure. That might make a good workshop area too. All right there, the neighbors have a little cabin. I've seen that on Google Earth, so I can use that as a reference. And then the Wet Weather Creek cuts out, goes back into their property. From the satellite, I saw they have a pond somewhere back in there, so good reference point. So that means that all of this would be drier. Good place to build. And there's the corner of the property. So now I'm standing in the corner of the property. I see the surveyor hung some markers, and there's a marker there, so I'm assuming there's a pin I'll find. Probably in the corner. Property lines might be right along the fence, mostly. So this fence is no good. It's shot that goes along the wet weather river, and the cattle can get out. There's a couple of good posts, metal posts, maybe enough to repair it. But this fence, going back to the nearest power poles, which is quite a way, 900 yards, maybe more, which is why I'm going to be off the grid. This fence looks pretty good too. So there's a little wet, dry spot that I could build on, kind of close by the neighbor's fence lines. So I'll look for a little farther in, but if I had some trees growing right through here, this would be a good spot for a workshop, so I'll consider it. This pile of brush actually might be a great big patch of raspberries, and this time of year it's hard to tell. I'll check that later on, or dewberries down here, but dewberries I thought grew one at a time. This looks like an old patch of raspberry. So no real lumber out of there that I can mill. I don't think. It's been down for a long time. That's cedar post maybe. So as I'm walking the fence line, I'm running into quite a few piles of cut cedar. There's a handful of them down there, a handful of them here. Leaving them down is just inviting fire, but these have already been logged, so I can come by and strip those. Probably 10 or 20, and I think I've counted, I need about 28 to 40, depending on the size, for the workshop. Now, the main house will be built out of ICF. Any cedar I use out of that will just be for stairwells or trim, whatever. So, a little more than halfway to the far corner where the shed was in the neighbor's pond. Following the fire break, that goes 100 acres that way, but I only have 30, so I'm looking for the surveyor's pin on the other side. Switching around, I see a couple more places that I could build. There's several of those in these cedar tree lines. See where the bulldozers had pushed a bunch of trees up, and there's some good logs in there for me to log. But the holes here aren't holding water, so that'll be a good test for the septic. The only permitting I need here in Bastrop County is the septic. So it's good to see it draining. I see some other cedars in here I could log. There's not much left to them. That one's a male. You can tell it's a little yellow. So plenty of logs for me to get. I might even be able to get enough for flooring. So I found the end of the surveyor's pin in this corner. I can't see the corner there, but it's a little ways down. And then here I see that the surveyor's driven some stakes. So if the fence men come in and fence that right, then I'll know right where this corner is. All right, so I'm going to go up there a couple of 100 feet, cut back in and cut over, see what's in that area. All right, I found a brush pile. I'm going to cut in and go back there. I'm going to guess 200 feet off the back fence line. Again, I'm looking for build sites. Plenty of opportunity, but I'm mostly marking the water today. But this whole half felt high ground. So this half from halfway down feels like high ground. Hey, looky, I found that deer skull from that pile of deer bones, probably, over yonder. I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10-point buck. 10-point buck on there. Put my finger in the window. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll leave it where I found it, tangled up in the tree. I'm assuming a hunter put it there, but I found a skull. So I'm going to be pushing through pretty dense scrub brush. Well, once I cleared the scrub brush where the deer skull was, there's a little clearing. If I cut down this male cedar here, there would be enough room for a 100 by 100 workshop in here. So there's a nice oak to rescue from the cedar that's choking it out. Most of these mesquites will bounce back. You'll be surprised as soon as the rain comes and February and March. But, so this would work. Just a couple of trees to clear. It would work. Now this spot's been being used for camping for quite some time. The folks that I bought this from said they cleaned it all up. The pigs used to be roasted there, and there's a burn pit in those pines somewhere. But this is a sizable spot too. Wouldn't take much work. Already has a road running into it. I don't have my drone with me to do a drone shot today. Getting late in the evening, but I'll come back and pick several of these spots and then fly over them with a drone flight. I'm going to keep going that way towards the fence. So I can feel the land breaking. Back in there was where the pit was for the hog cooking. And then just going straight back towards the fence east, but I could feel it running down that way. So again, it is high ground on this hot half. So several different spots that could be used for construction for sure. This is all open, but you can even see in the video the taper running down. All right, I cut due east from the far fence line. Found another really large clearing. I mean, this is homestead size. I could put a workshop here, a swimming pool, and a house. Already has a old logging road in it, I believe. Can't really see it in the video very well, but there's a road running through it. And over there is the neighbor's pond and little cabin. Over there is the, so I'm going to guess, south end of the property. So, and I can see some big trees down where the wet weather river is. So it's got a slope running down. This is really promising. I wouldn't have to clear anything. I got a fire breaker on the property already. So if it takes me a while to clear all of the cedar up off the ground and try to keep it from catching fire, I'll have that kind of time, maybe. All right, I'm going to keep going that way. Cut back over, just like I said, and go back up. And that'll finish up the woods. And probably by then it'll be too dark for me to do anything other than go home. So it's said back in there is that one area that I felt pretty good about putting a little homestead in there and a workshop. And then to follow it, there's that wet weather river on the one edge, east edge of the property. Pronounced ditch. If I put in river birch and planted some post oak in this area, it'd do really, really well. But I sure wouldn't want to put a house anywhere near that. But panning back to where I was, that area looks really promising. Yep, and I cut out to where the ditch was. I cut back in 100 feet. There's another ditch 100 feet there. So now I'm going to go straight back there to the fire line for the where the surveyors put in those fence posts. See what's back in there. All right. More of the same, but if I come in a couple of 100 feet through the cedars, then it breaks open. I feel like I'm going to find that post in my new camp here shortly. So, but this would make a little spot too. It's not muddy. Plenty of places to build on. So, and then I found a trail again. So that goes back to the fence line. Must be the 4th or 5th clearing that I found that's big enough to hold a homestead with a shop and a garage and a house. I'm going to use natural materials and try to go sustainable. I'm going to return all of this runaway cedar to a native forest. Try to save these oaks that are getting
beat up. Some of them have oak blight. I'll prune them up and try to get ahead of that. The mesquite's pretty tangled in here too. So I like mesquite, but I'll cut some of that back. Mesquite, when properly pruned, is a pretty good looking tree. But these are all just runaway scrub brush. Yeah, and indeed, I found that oak tree, that weird oak tree that was down. That's going to be a good marker. I'm going to guess 300 feet that way. So again, the trail, of course, is forcing me. I wanted to zigzag in and out in straight lines, but the undergrowth forces me out, staggers me around. And you'll see right there is the post. So I've made a full survey of the pined area. There's some nice looking oak trees back in here that need to be saved. So I'll prune away the mesquite and cedar that's growing underneath those and choking off the water. Cut out any mistletoe up in there. Yeah, and this site, as I said, oh, look, you can see if I pay real close attention where my wagon is, you can see that that's high ground. And then it goes down, down, down. Just like I said, it's getting down towards the stock pond. So the wagon area would work too. So this is a sizable area here. Then I wouldn't have to cut down any trees. And that's Steve for 1,000-year home. Or maybe 1,000 years from now, somebody will take a look at this video. We'll see. The land will be here. I told somebody today, even if Texas falls back under the water, the land will be here, and the changes I made will be here. But certainly I'll be long gone. But everything I do, I want to make sure I do for somebody I don't know in the future. I believe the Amish folks have that saying that we're merely borrowing the land from our children, right? And everybody who's ever planted a maple tree for maple syrup planted it for somebody else.
All right, so I did make a selection on a site, and you're looking at it right here. It was one of the first openings that we found. So my friend Leah let me borrow her truck, and we went back out with the drone, and I did an overflight, put out some timbers and a few concrete pads for us to start marking some things. So that little F-150's a lot handier than a Camaro. And so these logging roads are clearly visible from the sky, but to be honest, when you're in the thickets, sometimes the trail's pretty hard to see. You just get a feel with it because there's nothing left to scratch your face. That's that little hog pit where somebody was roasting a hog, and it's a real pretty little clearing right there, and also would have made a great place to build a house, but I've decided against that. Going to keep that as a little garden. In fact, I planted poppies there as well as blue bonnets and other native flowers. So flying back over this construction site, this is before development. I could still see that there's some male cedars in there. There's some that are a little more yellow than the females, and I'm going to cut those out. Most of those trees you see there are mixed in with the cedars are mesquite. There's very few oaks in that area, and some of those mesquite aren't doing very good either. So clearly the cedar is just sucking the moisture out of the ground, which is surprising because even during the drought, much of that was already really wet. If you look close, you can see a little red dot and a little yellow dot there. That's going to be where the new driveway is going to cut through, and it's going to go up. I'm following it roughly out of the corner, and then I'm going to fork around and go around both sides of the stock tank. And my goal is to turn that stock tank into some clear water. And I heard that if you can do a 20% bog and run some aeration in there, that you might be able to filter these small ponds, and that'll be a project that I'll work on. So now the drone is following I guess the hay pasture what the farmer has driven on, and there's some cow trails in there. That's where the Camaro was parked earlier, where they red plow is right now. So if you look at the neighbor property there that hasn't ever been logged, you'll see a lot more gray. It's this time of year. They're oak trees. And I don't have nearly that number of oak trees in there, and obviously the cedar's not that thick. When you take a look back around at my place, you could see that just a little smattering of oak trees, and mostly cedar. And the hayfields are in good shape. Any place where you see where it's just a little green, you'll know that that's a wet spot or the moisture saved. So there's a couple other spots where I could either perhaps make some other stock tanks, and or I'll need to be careful not to build there. But flying back over, you can see that I'm on a high and dry spot in a relatively flat topography. There's about a 20-foot drop from the north corner of the property, and it kind of leans back. And now you're looking at the neighbor's dock pond across the way, and that's about 20 feet drop down to that end, and it all kind of slopes that way. If I could fly a little farther yonder, but I didn't, it would all run into Buckner's Creek. So scanning back around, you get a good feel for the number of meadows and clearings that are there. Of course, when you're this high up, everything looks manageable and easy. But trust me, when you're down on the ground, you will get scratched. It's full of thorns, and the cedars aren't very inviting. And as you did my walk around, you could all see for yourself that it was pretty hard to see through. That trailer's mine as well as the equipment. And later on, I'll do a review of the tractor that I purchased as well as the implements, and I'll talk about that. So if you want to know how to build a house all by yourself as a man, you'll need a tractor, you'll need equipment. And so I made a good purchase on a good Mahindra, and I'll cover that at 1626. Here the drone is hovering directly over where the build site is, and now it's flying back over to give me an orientation of where the stock pond is, how the driveway will pop through the hedgerow there, come down through and hit that logging roll, and then come back around to this area that the drone is going to land down on. The little tiny mesquite tree there that's I needed to clear out, the couple of them. You'd be surprised how tough those are. Those roots are like iron. So getting that out of the ground was pretty tough. And now the drone is coming down. I called it home. It's going to come down and land on my head. But this area is where I'll be moving in. Two 40-foot high cube connexes, and then from there I'll quick build an Adobe style wraparound around it. Whether or not I use aircrete or rammed earth, I haven't decided yet, but I'm taking a look at all that. And I want to thank you for joining me. This is Steve at 1,000 Year Homes. Like and subscribe.